My name is Briana Pobiner. I'm a paleoanthropologist and educator at the National Museum of Natural History in the Human Origins Program, and I am the host for today's Hot Topic event, which stands for Human Origins Today: How Dogs Became Our Best Friends, the Genetics of Dog Domestication, with Dr. Audrey Lin, who I will introduce right now. So Dr. Lin, if you want to turn on your camera. Dr. Audrey Lin is a Peter Buck Postdoctoral Fellow in the Department of Anthropology in the National Museum of Natural History. She holds a BS in Biological Sciences from the University of Nevada, Las Vegas, an MSc in Infection and Immunity from University College London, and a DPhil in Evolutionary Biology from the Department of Zoology at the University of Oxford. During her DPhil, she used bioinformatic methods to investigate the consequences of genome evolution and its impact on molecular rate, demographic spread, and its physiological and functional impact over time. Her current research uses ancient DNA and RNA to answer questions about the complex evolutionary processes of zoonotic transfer and early domestication in animals and plants. Dr. Lin also continues to collaborate with other paleogeneticists, archaeologists, and anthropologists on projects focusing on reconstructing the evolutionary history of domestic species such as dogs, which she'll be talking about today, pigs, sheep, and the cassava plant species. So welcome, Dr. Lin. I will invite you to turn on your microphone to share your screen, and you can take it away with your presentation. Thanks to the audience for being here.
Hi, everyone. Let me share my screen here. Is that okay, Briana?
Looks great. Thanks.
Fantastic. Thank you. So hi, everyone. And thank you again for the introduction, Briana. My name is Audrey. I am a paleogeneticist. I study ancient genomes and the evolutionary history of organisms that I'm interested in, which includes animals like pigs and dogs, but also plants and pathogens. But today I am excited to talk about how dogs became our best friends and the genetics of dog domestication, but I'll also talk a bit about the archaeology of dogs and our diverse cultural history with dogs. So we humans have a very special relationship with dogs, and I don't think it's an overstatement to say that humans love dogs. Today, there's around 450 globally recognized dog breeds. The vast phenotypic diversity of modern dogs is a recent phenomenon, and most of what is considered ancient dog breeds are actually modern dogs. Most dog breeds, as we know them, only date to the late 19th century, around the Victorian times, where dog enthusiasts decided that they wanted to use intensive breeding practices and artificial selection to define and preserve specific characteristics and features in their dogs. And this gave rise to kennel clubs that considered themselves arbiters and guardians of dog breed standards. So to tell a little personal story, before the pandemic, I was a total cat person. I still love cats, but over the past year, I have found a great companion in a dog, and this is Pip. He is a very good boy, even though he gets annoyed when I stick my phone in his face for selfies like so, but that is okay. Pip is going to make occasional appearances during this presentation, just FYI. So we humans have many purposes for dogs, and the most obvious one of them is for companionship as our pets. But dogs also have a diversity of roles for us, which includes and is not limited to hunting. And these are the oldest known lineage images of dogs in rock art found in northwestern Saudi Arabia. This art dates to about 8,000 or 9,000 years ago, before the spread of pastoralism in this area. And these hunting scenes illustrate different dog-assisted hunting strategies. After the Neolithic and the domestication of livestock animals, humans used dogs to herd these animals. Dogs were used for protection and security for many thousands of years until today, as depicted in this variety of art forms. And I am particularly fond of this clay dog figurine from ancient Mesopotamia that has a cuneiform inscription that says, "Loud is his bark." Dogs are also used for transportation, pulling wagons and sleds full of goods and also of people. And there's a long history of using dogs in various sports, from blood sports like dog fights and dog baiting to dog racing. And these are usually for entertainment and gambling purposes. More recently, dogs are used in agility sports, racing through obstacle courses. And I have personally spent an embarrassing amount of time watching choreographed dog freestyle dancing competitions on YouTube. Dogs have historically also been used during warfare by the ancient Ephesians, Persians, and Romans, the colonial Europeans. They were used in both world wars, the Vietnam War, and they are used in the US military today as well. And I'd be remiss to not mention that another function of dogs for humans is as food. The consumption of dog meat is taboo in most of the world today, including in countries where dog meat consumption was relatively common. In most Western countries, dogs have been consumed usually during starvation conditions. Historically, though, there have been dogs that were raised for their meat. For example, the Aztecs raised breeds similar to the Mexican hairless dog, the Xoloitzcuintle, that were sometimes eaten, but they were more often used for companionship or sacrificed in ritual contexts. And even more recently, from news reports dating from about 10 years ago, there are apparently some places in rural Switzerland where locals eat dog meat. So let's take it to the beginning. Dogs, Canis lupus familiaris, were the first organism domesticated by humans from the wolf, Canis lupus. When, where, and how many times the domestication has occurred is still highly debated, with suggested dates ranging from 11,000 to 40,000 years ago. And these are the upper and lower boundaries, both of which I think is unlikely. What is agreed upon, though, is that the domestication of dogs predated the rise of agriculture. They were domesticated when humans were still hunter-gatherers preying on megafauna. As for where, the domestication could have taken place either once in Europe or East Asia, the Middle East, Central Asia, or even twice from independent wolf populations in Western and Eastern Eurasia. So domestication involves a two-way relationship between humans and the target plant or animal population. And there are many different views regarding the intentionality of the humans in these relationships. But in all domesticated animals, the single most important trait is behavior. Specifically, the reduced wariness or fearfulness and lower reactivity to external stimuli, which allows them to be more adapted to humans and to human environments. And it's this selection for less fearfulness and lower reactivity that has the most important and the most universal impact on domestic animals, like you see in this figure here. The path to domestication for these early animals was not a clear-cut linear process. It was a protracted process. It was a gradual change that was motivated by multiple unintentional factors. So there are several models of pathways to domestication. One of these is the commensal pathway, which describes an initial two-way mutualistic relationship. The dog was probably domesticated via this pathway, which began when less aggressive wolves that were probably subdominant pack members were drawn to human encampments as scavengers. And eventually these wolves may have assisted humans in capturing prey or provided defense from other large competing predators. And these wolves probably already had a lowered flight response, a higher stress threshold, and were less fearful around humans, which made them better candidates for domestication. So following domestication, there are distinct phenotypic changes that occur. And these are represented in what we refer to as the domestication syndrome. Many domesticate-specific traits are hypothesized to be determined by neural crest cells, which are represented in this blue tube on the left figure there. And these are stem cells that travel from their starting location in what eventually becomes the spinal cord to different parts of the body, and they contribute to the formation of many diverse structures in the body. So the consequence of these changes in the neurocrest cells in the dog compared to the wolf results in direct and indirect traits that we recognize as specifically dog-like. The snout is shorter, the dog has smaller teeth and less teeth. It has a curly or shortened tail, shorter limbs, floppy ears, and more diversity in coat and skin pigmentation. But most importantly, the most important changes involve the brain, which is smaller in dogs, and the nervous, adrenal, and pituitary systems, which all affect behavior. So all that being said, you would think that it would be easy then to tell from looking at a skull at a 15 to 20,000-year-old ancient canid whether or not they are a dog or a wolf, and not really. This stems from the ambiguity in the wolf populations that dogs were domesticated from and from early dogs. There's only subtle morphological differences between these wild and domestic populations during early domestication. Like if you compare the crania of this 36,000-year-old canid from Belgium to that of other ancient wolves. These domestication events are associated with hunter-gatherer cultures rather than agricultural societies. So there's an absence of material culture associated with these early stages of domestication. And finally, domestication history is really complicated. It involves a complex demography with population bottlenecks, expansions, local extinctions and replacements, regionally restricted gene flow between not only dogs and wolves, but between ancient and modern dogs. So it is highly likely that dogs were domesticated from a yet to be identified wolf population. And you can see this by looking at phylogenies. And this figure on the left is a phylogeny of the nuclear genomes of modern wolves and ancient and modern dogs. The dogs and modern wolves are in separate phylogenetic groups. And this clade with the North American wolves and Eurasian wolves that I circled in blue is separate from the clade that includes all dogs, which I had circled in purple. And this implies dogs are not genetically close to any specific modern wolf population, and the wild ancestor of dogs is now extinct. And since this divergence, there has been occasional gene flow between dogs and wolves over the last 10,000 years. Like I mentioned previously, we've yet to identify this extinct wolf population that dogs were domesticated from. And in the past, this is due to the lack of reference data from extinct wolves. But climate change is a bit of a boon to paleogenomics, where melting permafrost has revealed some really incredible mummies of extinct Pleistocene wild canids from the Siberian permafrost and the Yukon Territory. And here is another mummified Pleistocene wolf remain, a full head that was recovered from the permafrost in the Yakutia region of Siberia. So this recent ancient DNA study shows the diversity of Pleistocene wolves, where there were many populations that once existed that have gone extinct thousands of years ago. And analyses from the study show that all modern Eurasian and American wolf and dog populations originate from an unidentified wolf population that had expanded during the last glacial maximum around 21,000 years ago, which was when the ice sheets were at their greatest extent. The earliest known dog remains come from the Bonn Oberkassel site in Germany and date to the Upper Pleistocene, about 14,000 years ago. And these dog bone fragments are the remains of 2 dogs, and they were recovered with 2 human skeletons and grave goods in a double burial context. And one of these dogs was about 27 to 28 weeks old, and it had lesions indicating canine distemper infection, which has a very high mortality. And this dog must have been very sick and would not have been able to survive as long as it did without human assistance, during which the dog would not have provided any utilitarian use to humans. So this suggests that some humans in the late Pleistocene regarded dogs not materialistically, but had developed emotional, caring bonds for their dogs. Since Bonn Oberkassel, there's been many dog burials that have been found in other archaeological sites around the world. For example, dogs were recovered from the Podkalishnikova site in Siberia, which dates to about 6,000 years ago, and there are many dogs intentionally posed and buried with grave goods. Dogs were also found at the Tel Ashkelon site in Israel, which is a unique archaeological site where there's over 1,400 dog burials with partial and complete skeletons. And this burial tradition was practiced from the mid-6th to the early 4th century BC. So I had contributed to an ancient DNA study on ancient dogs that came out last year, and it was led by this outstanding group of people here. And in this study, 27 ancient genomes that date to almost 11,000 years ago were sequenced and analyzed. And if you look globally at this figure here, where the pie charts represent ancestry sources, starting from 11,000 years ago, there already were at least 5 different dog groups around the world. And with there being so much diversity 11,000 years ago, this suggests that dogs were domesticated earlier than that, during the Paleolithic. We find that new dogs came into Europe during the agricultural or Neolithic expansion of farmers from the Near East, meeting the previous dogs already there. And this existing genetic variation of Neolithic dog ancestry was replaced at some point in the last 4,000 years by a homogenization of ancestry found in not only European dog breeds today, but in most dogs around the world, and that's in blue here. But there are some modern dog breeds that have varying proportions of these ancient ancestral groups, like the Basenji and the Siberian Husky with Neolithic Levant ancestry, and dogs with pre-colonial American ancestry, like the Chihuahua and the Chinese crested dog, which is not from China. So remember when I said that dogs and wolves are in separate phylogenetic clades if you look at their nuclear genomes? It is a little bit different if you look at their mitochondrial genomes, as demonstrated on the figure on the right. The wolves are in orange and the modern and ancient dogs are in blue, and they're grouped in 4 major haplogroups, A, B, C, and D, with subclades within. And haplogroup A is the most diverse dog haplogroup and originally came from Eurasia. This homogenization of Eurasian ancestry in dog breeds today that I had previously referred to can also be seen in this example of mitochondrial haplogroup A, which represent a huge proportion of dogs worldwide. So the diversification of at least 5 dog ancestry lineages 11,000 years ago was followed by a dynamic population history that in many ways tracked that of humans, which likely reflects how dogs migrated alongside other human groups. But in several instances, these histories do not align, which suggests that humans also dispersed without dogs, that dogs were moved between human groups, or dogs were cultural and economic trade commodities. So lastly, I am going to talk about dogs in North America, where they have a very complex history. And this mostly comes from the science paper here that came out a couple of years ago in 2018. So there have been multiple introductions into the continent by humans starting from about 11,000 years ago, and then subsequent population replacements over the next several thousand years. And the first appearance of dogs in the North American archaeological record occurs 6,000 years after the earliest evidence of human activity. And it is unclear if dogs had accompanied humans during the first migration wave or later. However, it is clear that dogs were already domesticated when they first arrived, and once they did, they spread broadly. The archaeological evidence shows that dogs were present at different sites on the North American continent approximately 10,000 years ago, with the earliest dog found in Southeast Alaska dating to about 10,150 years ago. And this image is of the earliest dog burial found in the Americas, located at the Koster Archaeological Site in Illinois. So when this initial dog population entered North America, probably over the Bering Land Bridge, they then dispersed throughout the Americas, where they remained isolated for at least the next 9,000 years. And in the Americas, there were many diverse types of dogs that were kept by humans, from the long-haired Spitz-like dogs to terriers to the small hairless Xolo dogs in Mesoamerica. There were dogs that hybridized with the local wolves and coyotes to give them physical qualities that made them better hunters. Dogs were represented as important parts of mythology and origin stories for many cultures. Dogs were valued and they served diverse functions, from being consumed in ritual contexts, like as with the Aztecs, from their hair being used to make textiles, as with the Coast Salish of the Pacific Northwest, and the Chiribaya dogs in Peru were thought to have herded llamas and alpacas. So about 1,000 years ago, Arctic dogs have arrived in the Americas from East Asia with the Thule people, the ancestors of the Inuit. And before the Thule culture, dogs were rare in the American Arctic. The rapid expansion of dogs across the North American Arctic was probably associated with the later Inuit dog sled culture. And then in the late 15th century, Europeans brought a new wave of modern dog breeds that almost completely replaced the pre-colonial American dogs. And this replacement was partly due to cultural practices, since the European colonists preferred larger European breeds over the smaller indigenous dogs because they were considered more capable of defending settlements and livestock, and also more effective in hunting. The Europeans had used their dogs, their large, aggressive, armored hunting dogs, in warfare and as instruments of terror. Now, for the most part, the indigenous peoples that the Spanish encountered had never seen dogs used in this aggressive military context before. And all of the Spanish conquistadors used war dogs to subjugate the indigenous populations and to bring them under their control. And finally, the European dog breeds, as well as many other domesticated livestock that the Europeans brought over, may have also brought over diseases that the pre-colonial dogs were susceptible to. So the fourth introduction of dogs into the American continent occurred around the late 19th or early 20th century. And these were Siberian Huskies that were introduced during the Alaskan Gold Rush. And these dogs were primarily sled pullers, carrying passengers, cargo, and even mail. So the first dog population that lived in the Americas are considered extinct. There are a few modern dog breeds that have trace amounts of ancestry, like 3 to 4% from these extinct dogs. But in a way, these pre-colonial dogs are still alive in a different form as canine transmissible venereal tumor, or a CTVT, which is a transmissible cancer that affects dogs worldwide. CTVT is spread by the transfer of living cancer cells between dogs, usually during mating, and this cancer causes tumors that are associated with the external genitalia of both male and female dogs. These tumors are not genetically related to the host dog, but instead to the founder dog, the originator of the cancer. So all CTVT tumors are spread clonally, and all tumors carry the founder dog DNA. And by counting and analyzing the mutations acquired by the CTVT tumors around the world, researchers were able to estimate when CTVT emerged, which was about 11,000 years ago. And it is pretty incredible to think that the first American dogs now exist as a cancer, the oldest cancer known in nature that spread between dogs through an infection. And in a way, these dogs have become immortal. So that's it. I hope you all enjoyed this talk. I had a lot of fun putting it together. I would like to give a shout out to Paleo Barn and my PhD supervisor, Gregor Larson, for bringing me into this amazing world of ancient DNA and domestication. I would like to thank the Buck Foundation for my fellowship, to Briana for inviting me to do this talk, and to my NMNH advisors, Logan Kistler and Sabrina Schultz, and finally to Pip for being a best dog friend. And thank you for your time and attention.
Oh, thank you, Dr. Lin. That was a fantastic presentation. And we do have a lot of questions coming in, so I think we will jump right into them.
All right.
Let's see, how about a first question from Shelley, who says, it's been suggested that since Von Oberkassel is already identifiable as a dog, domestication must have taken place as much as 20 to 30,000 years earlier. What are your thoughts on this?
So I think that it is 20 to 30,000 years earlier I think it is probably unlikely. We don't have any physical evidence of that yet. I think one of the I think what is likely, and of course, it is there's many other archaeologists and geneticists that would disagree. But what is likely is that dogs were domesticated probably around 25,000 years ago during the LGM, when humans and wolf populations were isolated, and then that was probably when domestication had occurred. But then again, like, even with all of this, all of these amazing mummies that we're finding, and all of these ancient DNA, ancient dog papers that are coming out, it feels like every month. It's very exciting to watch. We still have not found that smoking gun, like first domesticated dog yet that fits within this hypothesized time period. So yeah, I don't know if that answered your question.
No, it does. It's an active area of scientific research, which is really exciting.
Yeah.
We have a great question from Brady, actually. What does domesticated mean?
So it means, so in the way, in this context anyway, it would mean that humans have intentionally taken control of the reproduction of an organism and have changed that organism according to traits that we humans find agreeable. I think that's kind of a very broad way of describing this domestication process. Anyway, so yeah, when it comes to very early the early organisms, the dogs, pigs, it is like the intentionality, like I was saying before, of humans in this process is not very clear. It probably these animals came to humans first in some way, because I find it very difficult, for example, for humans to say kidnap wolf pups from caves, and then over like many generations, and all the while having to raise these essentially wild animals, selecting for tamer pups. I don't think, I don't think that's likely. So I think that these initial pre-domesticated animals, these initial animals that first were attracted to humans, must have already had qualities that had made them more likely to be domesticated.
Great. I have two questions that are different but follow on really nicely with that the answer you gave. The first is, speaking of quality, so Jeffrey says, dogs are such friendly animals. Is there a gene for that?
So this is another area where there is disagreement, but there was one study that had suggested that that there are similarities between dogs and humans with the genetic disorder Williams syndrome, which is a deletion in a specific chromosomal region in chromosome 7. It's like a really interesting example of like a true deletion resulting in a really obvious phenotype. So these people with Williams syndrome, they are like really happy, cheerful. They have like a bit of a Keebler elf appearance, and this paper suggests that the genes involved in this Williams syndrome region in humans are also their analogs in dogs result in the same cheerful disposition, happy, people loving. So that's one hypothesis anyway for this happy gene.
Thank you. It's interesting that might be the case. Here's a fun question from Jonathan. Is it possible that Homo sapiens' alliance with dogs may have given us an evolutionary advantage over Neanderthals?
Possibly, yeah. I think Briana maybe would be able to, maybe you're more familiar with the culture of Neanderthals and also the time period in which they died out.
Yeah, I've certainly heard of this idea. There's a popular book by Pat Shipman, who's an archaeologist, about this. And so, yeah, the suggestion is that the ability to use dogs to hunt and for other purposes was potentially one of the multiple reasons why Homo sapiens, why our species outcompeted Neanderthals. But yeah, I would say it's possible.
Yeah, since there's no evidence of Neanderthals being associated with dogs in the archaeological record.
Yeah, exactly. So speaking of intentionality, which you mentioned before, The Walden family asks, why did they mummify wolves? And I'm actually going to wonder, do you think that that was some sort of intentional practice, or just that these wolves happened to die in a very cold, dry place where they were preserved?
Yes, exactly. The second part.
Yeah,
Exactly.
So it doesn't look like that they were necessarily, that this wasn't a cultural practice. These were just naturally mummified wolves.
Yes, and I think that I think that those wolf mummies that I showed, they were not found in any human context. They were like in caves, so they just happened to die in this cold, dry area, and where they were found thousands of years later.
Lucky for us that cold and dry things preserve not only soft tissue, but DNA really well.
Exactly.
So here's a fun question about the process. A few people have asked us about domestication. So somebody who signed in as Antlord said, apparently dogs domesticated us. And Eve said, probably dogs and cats domesticated us. The cats like mice that came with our storage of wheat and grains. So what do you think about that sort of like co-domestication idea?
Well, I mean, it would there definitely was like a co-evolutionary process going on. For the dogs and cats, they had a purpose for us, and maybe in the example of cats being vermin and pest controllers, they would allow us to be better equipped to stay in one place. So these animals helped facilitate the transition to sedentary societies. So yeah, certainly, and that huge transition has really huge consequences and consequences for us as people. So yes.
Yeah. Great.
I agree.
So here's a question that I'm going to add on my own PS question to. So Sydney asks, how long have you been studying dogs? And I would love to know how you got interested in this project in the first place.
So I kind of lucked into this project, to be honest. I mean, I generally, so I first and foremost am a evolutionary biologist. So there are many properties in evolutionary biology that you can use to study anything. So I originally was mostly a microbiologist, and then I had a opportunity to work with Gregor Larson at Paleobarn while I was doing my PhD or DPhil, and that was just so lucky for me. I mean, I was aware of ancient DNA studies. I didn't really know how to get into it beforehand, but given that I don't have an archaeology background, but I had skills that I had gained from the areas I was studying before that could be adapted to studying ancient DNA. So yeah, that was, I think I started working with ancient DNA in 2016. And I love every moment of it, even the frustrating infuriating moments. It's great. I love my job.
Oh, fantastic. So do I. I get to ask you really fun questions. That's part of my job today. So here's a good question from Stephen. And I know it's about modern DNA, but do you know if there's any similarities between mitochondrial DNA of dogs and that of humans?
I not sure I really understand that question, but I mean, similarities in that as in that the properties, the physical characteristics of the mitochondrial DNA as a molecule coming from the mitochondria organelle, it's the same. It's the same for all all vertebrate animals. And in that it's maternally inherited, and it's considered one locus, and you can get you can get population information from specific markers in the mitochondrial genome, which makes them useful in trying to learn about populations, the spread of populations over time. So yes, there are similarities.
Great, thank you. So this may be a question that you don't know the answer to because it's a more archaeology question, but Amy asks, what type of grave goods have been found in those 14,000-year-old dog burial sites?
So this includes it includes the dogs being intentionally posed, maybe in a sleeping position with paws together. Maybe they were buried with with shells and other ornaments that would not have been just randomly appeared there. Sometimes they would be covered or marked with red ochre, that sort of thing.
Cool, thank you. Here's an interesting question from Landon. Are dogs like German Shepherds more related to wolves compared to something like a cane corso or a retriever or pugs? I guess, are there particular modern dogs today that are more closely related to wolves, or are they all similarly closely related?
I think there are some modern dogs that were intentionally hybridized with wolves to give them specific properties that would make them more wolf-like. I can't remember what these dog breeds what the breed name is now, but I think that there are some breeds that have a little bit more wolf admixture. I think the Siberian Husky is one of them. But as for the other dog breeds, they are similarly removed from wolves.
Okay, thank you. Here's a question from Molly. So there was a slide, she thinks it might have been the neural crest slide, showing specific mutations in the domesticated dog which differ from wolves. In modern dogs, other than maybe genes coding for physical differences, are there specific genes that code for a more friendly personality or intelligence, etc.? For instance, she said contrasting a border collie with a pug.
This is actually something which I am not that familiar with this area. I don't really have an answer to that. I'm sorry.
No, that's fair. And so actually this is a similar question that I think I might know the answer to. So Laura asked, have you teamed up on any research with the NIH Dog Genome Project researchers, or is that kind of outside of your research questions?
I'm sorry, can you repeat that?
Sure. So the question is, have you teamed up on any research with the NIH Dog Genome Project researchers?
I think that some of them are collaborators, but I have not personally met them, but I would like to.
Excellent. And I think, it seems like a lot of these genetic projects have really big research teams, which is really neat because people have different kinds of inputs and contributions to this research. So it's a little bit of an aside, but we have some really sweet requests to meet Pip in person from Eva Jane. And June says that Pip is such a good boy. Please give him a substantial belly rub session. So I just wanted to have a little dog moment in there.
I will definitely do that. I will. He is being a good boy. He's hiding.
All right, so a little bit maybe back to some of the content towards the end of your talk. So Frederick asks, is this early dog cancer caused by a viral or a bacterial infection? I don't know if there's a way to tell that.
Yeah, I don't think there's any way to tell that. It could have, however it happened, it stayed that way.
Okay, thanks. And then here's a question from Shelley also about that part of your presentation. Do we know if CTVT is transmitted from a mother to her pups?
So it probably could be, it's mainly transmitted through mating, but that's not the only way of transmission. So maybe.
We have two similar questions about some of the oldest dogs. So Shelley asks, what is the oldest breed of dog, if you happen to know? And Gabriella asks, did all different breeds of dogs come from the same ancient breed? And I guess some of that question to me makes me think of, was there a single domestication of dogs, which then all modern dogs have kind of flourished from, or were there maybe multiple domestications of dogs?
So that is one of the hotly debated things, whether or not there were one or multiple dog domestication events, so to speak. I think so. What it looks like right now is that all dogs are descended from an unidentified and an extinct wolf population that lived somewhere in Eurasia. And I think that perhaps and we don't know what this wolf looked like. It's very possible that it could have already been more dog-like than expected. We keep referencing the gray wolf because they are the closest relative, but this extinct wolf population may have already been quite different from the gray wolf. So this extinct wolf may, like I was saying, may already have shorter legs or less teeth, and the personality may have been different. It may not have it may not live in the sort of social hierarchy that wolves live in, which made them more, which then would make them more likely to come to humans to feed on the garbage heaps that humans were leaving. So yeah, we don't know. This is all speculation.
Yeah, it would be nice. I keep thinking if we had a time machine, we could just go back 10 or 15,000 years and look at the behavior of these earliest dogs. But
yeah, exactly.
But that would be great.
Yeah, and even so, like the dog domestication, it was a long process. It is not like an overnight thing. It was slow. It could have taken place over thousands of years, and like how it's really hard to really parse out the fine details of this process with the archaeological record, and the ancient DNA that we study is only as good as what the archaeological record is, and even so, it's well, no, that's not really true. It's only as good as the preservation conditions within the archaeological record. So. Yeah.
No, it's a good point. Sometimes I think about it like if you have something that's on a long continuum and, if wolves are at one end and domestic dogs are at the other, but you only have bits and pieces of that continuum, how do you draw a line and say that's a wolf and this is a dog? And so I think these are the questions that archaeologists who study domestication have to ask.
Yeah.
Or are struggling to ask, I guess. All right, so
exactly.
I have a totally different question, which is a fun question that I don't know if you know the answer to because it's about behavior, but Michaela asks, do dogs howl like a wolf?
So there, I think that what are considered more like wild dogs, they don't howl, they don't bark either. So I think it may have been it may have been unintentional, like maybe a gene for some trait that humans liked was selected for, and then an unintentional consequence of that resulted in the dogs no longer howling or vocalizing like a wolf. So I guess the short answer is I don't think so.
That's a great short answer, thank you. So here's a question about domestication in popular culture. An anonymous attendee asks, did you see that movie Alpha about the first domestication? And if so, what did you think of it?
No, I haven't seen it. What is this movie?
I haven't seen it either. I'm not aware of it. So it's something I guess we'll both have to look up after this.
Yeah.
Interesting question. So we have a few more minutes and I'll maybe take one or two more questions. Let's see. Oh, here's a kind of more broad question from Ajibola. What would you say about different genetic breeds? And I don't know if the question is just about dogs or in general, but did this happen through natural selection or human interference selection?
For breeds?
Yeah. So maybe he's asking, or she is asking about the just breeds of dogs in general. Do you think that the process of the creation of different dog breeds was something that was part of artificial selection by humans, or something that was just part of natural selection?
So yeah, the creation of different dog breeds was artificial selection by humans. Like what I mentioned at the beginning of my talk, most of the many breeds that we know they only date to about the Victorian times. But before that, there were like certain types of dogs, but like, Mastiffs and Terriers, but the further development of these breeds according to different physical or whatever traits that humans had decided that came later, and it was all artificial.
Selection, human manipulation.
Yeah.
All right, this is a great question that I want to end with, a question from Molly. Studying dogs and their history and evolution sounds like a dreamy job. What does a day in the life of Dr. Lin look like?
Well, it is very unglamorous. I think if I have to articulate it out loud, I mean, I think it's great because as a postdoctoral fellow, I can do whatever. I'm like responsible for my own research. I can do whatever I want. I don't have to talk to anybody I don't want to. I don't have to interact with anybody. I can just study, and so it involves a lot of staring at the computer and thinking and being quite comfortable with my own company and also the company of Pip, and it has been very inspiring getting to know Pip over the last year, because I had never really, well, I liked dogs before, but I never really got them. And with Pip, he is just he's so smart, and he is such an ass. It makes me, observing him makes me feel like a bit closer to what I study, which is something that I had never really felt before. I mean, can't get really close and cuddly with like E. coli or influenza in the same way.
I hope not.
Yeah.
You might not want to.
Exactly.
Well, thank you. Thank you for that wonderful answer. So we're going to wrap up. It is 12:30. I want to thank everyone for being here. Thank you, Dr. Lin, for your fantastic presentation and for answering all these great questions. I apologize for all of the other questions we didn't have a chance to answer. I want to remind people that if you'd like to watch this video again, it will be posted on the NMNH, the National Museum of Natural History video webinars archive page within the next few weeks, and you can look in the answered questions to see the link for that. Also, just a quick shout out to Shelley. Thank you for posting the IMDb link to that movie about domestication, so we can go check it out. I also want to give a plug to our next monthly hot topic, Human Origins Today topic presentation on May 20th at 11:30 a.m. Paleo artist John Gurche will talk about his work in reconstructing what ancient humans look like. Thanks everyone for being here, and have a great rest of your day. Bye-bye.